I've heard about the canary in the mine shaft giving warnings about dire changes threatening the life of miners. Well, what would you look for in the bush? According to this programme's resident birdo, it might be my namesake, little robins. Once they were plentiful, but where are they now? Sue Taylor.
It was my father's 90th birthday, and all his friends in the bush had gathered to celebrate in the local hall. You know the sort of thing, tables groaning with homemade country cooking, endless cups of tea, and lots of friendly chit-chat. I took the opportunity to catch up with a couple of great bushmen, people I rarely see since my parents have moved from their country home into an aged care facility in Melbourne. Both these bushmen are great birders. Both are impressive all-round bushmen. One has discovered 3 new species of orchids in the Australian bush. The other is particularly good on bird calls. They live in the township, about 20 minutes' drive from my parents' bush block. I greeted the first man as he was getting his obligatory cup of tea. After the requisite pleasantries, I got down to business. "And how's the birding?" I asked. He replied that there was no birding anymore. All the small bush birds had simply disappeared. He told me that his brother had taken to making robins out of old ice cream containers, painting them and placing them around his front yard. He chuckled, at a distance they didn't look too bad. And that was the only way you'd ever see a robin these days. I was dismayed. Robins constructed from plastic ice cream containers were not what I had in mind at all. I expected to see real red-capped robins, hooded robins and eastern yellow robins. I expected to see them easily and often. I should explain that my parents' property is in north-central Victoria. It is open grey box woodlands with occasional yellow box, red stringy bark, Blakely's red gum and long-leaved bundy. The understory comprises correa, hotbush, hakea and 3 species of wattle. In spring, the wildflowers can be breathtaking. My parents bought the place in 1974, simply because of the prolific bird life. They were still working in the city at that time. We all made frequent visits and eagerly compiled bird lists. In 1985, my parents moved to live there, and my visits became more frequent and my bird lists more numerous. Now I have voluminous records of the bird life in that little bit of Victoria for a period of over 30 years. But my records suddenly became less frequent from late 2006, when my parents were moved, kicking and screaming, albeit feebly, into an aged care facility in Melbourne. It is also true that later visits to my parents' place were more occupied with caring for them than observing the birds. Nevertheless, I had noticed a reduction in cuckoos and a worrying decline in eastern yellow robins, so much so that I raised the matter with a Melbourne expert. Were our eastern yellow robins in trouble? They used to be very common at Mum and Dad's place. Now they are rare. The last one I saw was in April 2005, and it was an unusual and exciting sighting. The Melbourne expert assured me that eastern yellow robins were flourishing in Melbourne. I had nothing to worry about, so I didn't raise the subject of cuckoos. Nevertheless, there had been a noticeable decline in cuckoos too. I hadn't seen a fan-tailed cuckoo since 2005, a pallid cuckoo since 2000, a black-eared cuckoo since 1993, and what was once a common bird, Horsfield's bronze cuckoo, is now a rare sighting. My explanation for the demise of the black-eared cuckoo is simple. They parasitise hosts with dome-shaped nests. I believe that in our neck of the woods, this meant they used speckled warblers as hosts, and while my records show I used to see them regularly, I haven't sighted a speckled warbler at my parents' place since 1999. The demise of the once common Horsfield's bronze cuckoo is not so easily explained. These birds are raised most successfully by fairy wrens and thornbills. And while I believe that our chestnut rump thornbills are in decline, our yellow and yellow rump thornbills are still present, although not as common as before, as are our superb fairy wrens. Horsfield's bronze cuckoos therefore should still be able to find hosts. Perhaps now it's easier for them to find hosts elsewhere. It seems to me now that my initial concern about the demise of the eastern yellow robin from our little patch of Victoria was well placed. While the bird's Australian status is common, it is difficult to persuade people that a local decline may be significant. My informant at my father's party now volunteered that not only had all the robins gone, even the yellow-plumed honeyeaters had disappeared. Yellow-plumed honeyeaters inhabit mallee scrub. In fact, they are sometimes called mallee honeyeaters. I've never seen them on my parents' place, but if I walk down the road a bit, as I usually do to boost my bird count, I could, in the past, often add them to my list. Not anymore. Honeyeaters are aggressive little birds. I expect them to be able to stand up for themselves. If the yellow-plumed honeyeaters have gone, something serious is happening to our ecosystem. What about the southern scrub robin? I asked anxiously. These are one of my favourite birds, and I like to think that there was a nice patch of mallee scrub where I could go to see them reliably. All gone, said my informant sadly. The Department of Sustainability and Environment burnt the scrub. No one has seen a scrub robin since. Deflated, I didn't feel inclined to celebrate my father's birthday. I sipped my tea pensively and wandered off looking for the other birder I was determined to catch up with. He's a lovely man with sparkling blue eyes. He shares my love of southern scrub robins. I found him at the back of the hall and was taken aback when he didn't recognise me. Had I aged so much since we'd last been birding together? I flashed my name tag, obligatory so that my father could identify his friends, and we were immediately old friends again. I'm told the scrub robins have gone, I said. Everything's gone, he said sadly. No birds, no nests. I used to walk through that mallee scrub and find 18 or 19 nests in an afternoon. Now I'm lucky if I find one. I thought for a moment, trying to remember the last nest I'd seen at my parents' place. Leaving aside the ubiquitous New Holland honeyeater, the last nest I could remember photographing was a mistletoe bird's in January 1998. I used to be always photographing nests. Hooded robins, red-capped robins, eastern yellow robins, Gilbert's whistlers, diamond firetails, brown tree creepers, white-winged trillers, dusky and white-browed wood swallows, chestnut-rumped thornbills, and honeyeaters of all descriptions. I hadn't photographed a nest in years. I'd put it down to spending my time at my parents' place tending to my ageing parents. But in fact, I'd always found time to do a little birding, and I simply hadn't been finding any nests. It was great to catch up with those two bushmen, although I can't pretend it was good to hear their independent and identical reports of doom for the bush birds of north-central Victoria. I went home to consult my records and to verify what they'd told me was true. Confirmation was right there in my own records. It has been known for some time that our woodland birds are threatened in some areas. Birds such as hooded robins, diamond firetails, southern whiteface and Jackie Winters. All birds I used to count as common at my parents' place. Diamond firetails occur in open woodlands and lightly timbered areas. The far more common red-browed finch is far less fussy. It occurs in a wide variety of habitats, including grasslands, open forests, scrublands, land cleared for agriculture, and city parks and gardens. In recent years, while the diamond firetails have been declining at my parents' place, I've begun to notice the appearance of red-browed finches. I'd hate to think that this was the beginning of a displacement. Hooded robins are said to be an indicator species. If they are present, the woodland birds still have a foothold. I'm pleased to say that I occasionally still see a hooded robin at my parents' place. I also see brown tree creepers sometimes, but not as frequently as in the past. There's also a remnant handful of southern whitefaces, but I doubt it's a viable population. The decline in the whiteface population is a shame. Many years ago, before anyone had heard of Sean Dooley and his phenomenal annual twitch of 703 species, Roy Wheeler, a famous Victorian birder, set out to see 600 species of birds in 1 year. In those days, Roy did not have the benefit of the internet, mobile phones, or friends arranging spots on pelagic trips for him. Still, he achieved 600 species in 1 year. Roy went to my parents' place to tick the southern whiteface. He wouldn't do that today. There's another very special bird that's in serious decline. I'm sorry that I didn't think to ask my friends at my father's party about it. 20 years ago, I could see it reliably in every month of the year. I last saw it at my parents' place in January 1996. It is the crested bellbird. This bird has disappeared from more than half its former range. Surely grounds for concern. And while the yellow-plumed honeyeater has gone, the yellow-faced honeyeater has recently arrived. The yellow-plumed honeyeater has specific requirements. He must have a habitat of mallee scrub. The yellow-faced honeyeater has eclectic taste. Yellow-faced honeyeaters inhabit forest, woodland, heath, mangroves, orchards, parks and gardens. It has been said that yellow-faced honeyeaters are perhaps the most common and most widespread of the honeyeaters that inhabit the woodlands of southeastern Australia. Other honeyeaters have gone too, although the red wattlebird population has increased, and inevitably the noisy miners are moving in. One morning, many years ago, my father and I excitedly counted 17 species of honeyeaters at a waterhole before breakfast. Today you'd get 3 or 4. The number of black-chinned honeyeaters has decreased, although I did see one in September 2005. Black-chinned honeyeaters have a very distinctive call and are hard to miss. We have no shortage of magpies, galahs or Australian ravens, and I wonder whether the white-winged choughs are becoming more common. I certainly see them more often today than I did 20 or 30 years ago. The disappearance of the southern scrub robin is explained by the fire lit by the Department of Sustainability and Environment. The decline in other species is not so easily explained. There has been no recent change in the vegetation of my parents' property. One neighbour has planted more trees. Another neighbour is growing ostriches. The farm over the road looks the same to me. The state forest at the back is, superficially at least, unchanged. Although many of these bird species are sedentary, I believe that their demise must be explained by what is happening to land further afield. I can only assume that land degradation further away means that bird populations at my parents' place are no longer viable. There are no nearby populations to replace lost birds or to provide new blood into a community. Whether or not my assumption is correct, I wish there was something I could do about it. I certainly do not want to have to make do with robins constructed from plastic ice cream containers. In my opinion, it is way past time for us to be alert. It is time for us all to be very alarmed. Very alarmed indeed.
Sue Taylor, and I wonder what the bird count is like in other parts of Australia. You might let her know via the Birdo links in Victoria.